So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining today. And thank you, starting off, to Ronald and Mohammed at the Kenyan Red Cross International Center for Humanitarian Affairs for helping with the digital hosting of this webinar session. This webinar is part of a series being held to encourage discussion and build consensus around a resolution being organized for the December Council of Delegates on the principled and accountable use of information and communication technologies in humanitarian action. You can learn more about the resolution at a microsite created for it. I've posted the URL for the website into the chat, so feel free to explore that later and watch for additional series later in the year. Today, I'm very excited to have you join us for a panel discussion on movement approaches to emerging technology. I'll be moderating the discussion, prompting the speakers from a list of preset questions and asking additional questions that may emerge as we chat. If you have questions as we go or have queries that you want to pose to the speakers, please post them in the chat for consideration. We may or may not be able to get to them depending on where the panel discussion takes us, but they also might be useful for future direction of the webinar series and additional topics we might try and cover. For today's discussion, we have some great speakers with us. We're still hoping one more joins, but with us now, we have Benjamin, who's the ICRC's Chief Information Officer, and Swabira, the Innovation Officer for the Kenya Red Cross Society. So kicking off, we have lots to talk about today, but maybe by way of kind of a sort of introduction, Benjamin and then Swabira, could you briefly tell us a project that you've most enjoyed working on in the past year so we have a sense for what you do in your role?
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you. It's great to be here. And well, it's great to have a few people online as well. And thank you. Hi, Heather. Great to see you as well. I could not really point out to a single project, but we have a number of instances where AI capabilities are implemented in a way which is really aligned with our AI policy, and they bring a significant value. So, for example, on the IT side of the shop, we have started to see, for example, the translation of applications to offer them in several languages at a speed that is really unprecedented, and actions that would have, piece of work that would have taken months have been basically done in a couple of weeks. So I think that's one of the examples which really sticks out. Another one is the analysis of very old documents from our archives that could be really digitalized in a much better way, and where the information available in these archives can be extracted and showed to the world. And I would say the last one is an integration of immersive technologies with AI. So like we have today a training a tool which is leveraging an avatar and helps people to be trained to go through checkpoints, for example. And this is really these kind of technologies are becoming much easier and faster to develop thanks to AI, and we can definitely find use cases which are fully aligned with our principled approach.
Great, thanks, Benjamin. Swabira?
Thanks so much, Dan, and this is a lovely opportunity always to learn from each other. So my name is Swabira Abdulrazak. I'm part of the innovation team at the Kenya Red Cross. That's the Research and Knowledge Hub, that's ICHA, the International Center for Humanitarian Affairs. And so in ICHA, we pretty much work around 5 thematic areas. That's innovation, data and research, policy advocacy, climate action, and we also host the Global Migration Lab. And I think this is a really exciting question for me, like in terms of an exciting project that we've worked on recently. I'm part of the innovation team, but I also lead the drones team. So allow me to answer this specific to drones, right? So we were deployed to support an international drill. It was on with the Kenya Maritime Authority, and it was an ocean spill drill, and we were like 11 countries in the Indian Ocean, and we had countries like Kenya, Somalia, Seychelles, Mozambique, Tanzania, and we had different roles as countries. And our role as the Kenya Red Cross drone team was to make sure we have a live stream linked to the command center, and that would mean that we were in the deep sea flying a drone and trying to secure a clear link to the command center to show how the drill was going and like the steps around the drill. So as much as we were learning a lot about the effects on like an oil spill drill in terms of climate action, for us it was a crazy learning experience because um, in theory it sounds really simple, like, oh, you'll just go to the ocean and fly a drone and you'll be fine. But I think this is when we learned the important roles we play as a team, right? Because we had someone who was live streaming this event for like 4 hours, and we had to make sure that Ronald was stable and holding the camera well, just to make sure we have a proper live stream. And then we had someone on charging duty, and this is on a ship, right? We had someone who was just checking to see if the wind allows us to fly at all, because the kind of conditions when you're that far in are not really suitable for flying, but we had to figure out how to make it work. So there are a lot of different aspects that came along with that mission, but we learned so much about teamwork and how a multi-agency team works when they are deployed for like a drill, perhaps. So that was pretty crazy for us, a very good learning opportunity for us. But yeah, it definitely put us on the map and the movement as a whole. So that's a really proud moment for us. Thanks, Dan. Back to you.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing about that experience. Taking the leap and doing something new always takes a bit of courage. Large organizations are not always the most courageous, can sometimes be kind of set in their ways. I'd be curious, what has triggered your organizations having the courage to explore new technology? How did you get organizational buy-in and the resources to try these things out? Benjamin, maybe you can talk a bit about how your policy came into place and how that has either kind of helped you with exploring new technologies, or maybe if you felt it has been restrictive, would love to hear that side of things as well.
That's a great question. And I think, well, first of all, we don't utilize technology because it's interesting or because it's a new hype. I think the approach is really based on the needs of the people we serve or the communities we support. So the trigger for using new technology is always a new need, a limitation of resource, or some frontier that we have to unlock. So typically, when we are in places where Wi-Fi or cell network is not really available, then we are really pushed into identifying new technologies that could be used, typically radio technologies or sometimes things which are either very old that we try to modernize, like or things which are really cutting edge. And of course, satellite isn't always available in this kind of condition, so we have to find ways to leverage whatever technology is available to work on that. And that's one aspect. But another aspect, and you were referring to the policies, we of course are really paying a lot of attention to neutrality, independence, and impartiality, and it has really pushed us to identify a few areas where open source technology would be the best way to guarantee independence and resilience in the long run. And that typically was really supported by the institution in essence. And we have been able to make the link between these new kind of technologies and their strong alignment with the mandate and the principled approach. So I think overall, it's important to find this balance between the principled approach, the needs that are specified and needs to be really clearly identified with the people around the field, the practitioner. So it's not technology for technology, but really technology in the service of the mission, and then in alignment with the principled approach.
Thank you, Benjamin. Swabira, getting the organization to buy into the use of drones is not always the easiest task. I think it can be, very interesting and cool technology. It's very easy to see a drone, unlike software, which can be sometimes a bit more nebulous. Was it hard to convince the Kenyan Red Cross to start a drone team?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I'm trying to remember back 5 years ago, was it hard? I think a very unique aspect we have as a national society, Kenya Red Cross, is that, and I always say this when I talk about our senior leadership, they are very progressive, they're very supportive of innovation from the very beginning. So they've always really pushed us to explore different tools that are accessible to us. So in terms of, was it hard? It wasn't really hard because we did have senior leadership buy-in. So we just had to figure out how to bring use cases on board and how to test those, and then now go back to the programs team and really figure out how to qualify what works for them, right? So, I mean, eventually with time, getting departments to understand how drones can work to their advantage and bring value to their projects, there was a bit of stalling here and there because you really have to take time to show people the value, especially when they are chipping into their resources, right, to fund this based off us being excited about new technology, right? So we really have to take a step back and figure out how to bring on the programs team on board and how to show them value. So we'd even find ourselves trying to figure out which project might have some resources to spare, and then we'd customize a use case for them to show them added value, and that usually would work in our favor because, I mean, it's one thing to tell someone that, oh, I have drones that can add value to your project, but it's different when you go straight to the climate team and you're like, so you're restoring mangroves in this county, right? Okay, can I show you how a drone can really amplify and show, like, we collect good data and we show you in terms of mangrove health, how that can address how to report for the project and your progress. And then now they're all excited. They're like, okay, this is a really cool way to report to show the progress of the mangroves they're restoring. So it's really about figuring out what works for who and how to add value, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's been hard. Yeah, it's about packaging.
Great, thank you. And it looks like Wilson, thank you for joining us. Wilson is our third panelist, and he is the manager of ICTs at Colombian Red Cross. So I'm going to jump back, and our first question for our panelist, Wilson, if you're here, can you come on video and just confirm your audio is working?
Yes, good morning. Excuse me, a little late, so I'm dreaming right now. Yes, I'm here. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us. No worries on being a little bit late. Wilson, just briefly, by way of an introduction, could you tell us kind of one of the projects you've been working on in the past year that you've been most excited or most enjoyed? So we have a sense of kind of what your role is at the Colombian Red Cross.
Yes, in this moment, on the past, I was working in projects with the principal objectives is the EA and government data. This is the principal objectives for Colombian Red Cross because this objective is the principal things for gold or future gold. In this moment, we have analytics projects in analytics and EA. We have two projects in data analytics and data quality. This is the principal objectives in uh, uh, here in Colombia.
Great. Thank you for sharing about that.
Thank you.
Can you just remind the audience, for those of us, including myself, who aren't familiar with the acronym, what does EA stand for? Wilson, is EA emergency assistance or something else?
Yes, in emerging systems. In this moment, we have a project with the Durieux company, and the objective is the analytics and the alerts in the environment and the transformation with the EA, and send the users with the georeferencing. And this is the object in this moment is working in this project. So only actions, humanitarian actions is only.
Great. Thank you. Benjamin, in your previous answer, you mentioned a bit about making sure that your new technologies that you're exploring are grounded in the needs of staff, I think. Can you talk a bit more about kind of how the ICRC approaches stakeholder engagement when shaping or evaluating the technologies that you're deploying?
Well, that's a great question. I think that's probably where we have the most to develop and to learn. So first of all, the technologies that we are deploying are really diverse and wide, because some of them are directed towards the community, some of them are directed towards the staff, and some of them are really uh, like any other organization, including different types of organization, really just to make the business run in a way with logistics and financials and the digital workplace. So I think it's really wide, and it's where we have different types of stakeholders to engage. But maybe one of the areas where we believe there is a significant need for stakeholder engagement. Of course, when it comes to solutions which are to be deployed in the field, the involvement with communities is really critical. But I would like to maybe zoom in on a specific project, which is the digital emblem, because this requires a significant involvement of a number of layers in the ecosystem. So the digital emblem is this initiative and project which aims at creating an equivalent of the Red Cross or Red Crescent emblem in the digital world to signal to cyber operators the protected status of humanitarian or potentially or medical facilities in conflict zones. This kind of initiatives project requires the involvement of tech companies, requires the involvement of sometimes academia, and potentially standardizations, institutions, and of course humanitarian actors. So this is the type of activities where I believe the collective approach is necessary and can only be successful. Other examples are, for example, training for cybersecurity that we have developed with other humanitarian organizations, or including as well the collaboration within the network of the Red Crescent and Red Cross societies. So I think we have a number of examples where the engagement of stakeholders and collaboration is really the way to accelerate innovation and create emerging technologies which are faster adopted and are closer to the needs of the people we serve.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, definitely a complex series of relationships to navigate. Swabira, I don't think you need to worry much when flying a drone over the ocean, but I'm sure some of your missions involve flying over communities. I was wondering maybe if you could talk a bit about how you engage with the communities who might see a drone and wonder, what it's being used for and if they're in any sort of danger.
Sure thing. I think this was a challenge we had maybe 2-3 years ago, a couple of years ago, where we'd really be, as part of our pre-site surveys, is that we'd go to the field maybe a week in advance, and we'd be sitting together with community leaders and different stakeholders in these places we'd be going to, and trying to figure out how to disseminate this in the best way to ensure that we are, first of all, ensuring them that we are doing no harm, and letting them know that we are either collecting data for these certain use cases, and we'll be sure to share back any insights. So those are conversations I think we were having maybe 2-3 years ago. Right now, it's a bit interesting. It's the community telling us, "You've come with a drone here. What are you doing with a drone? Are you guys taking? Are you surveilling us?" So, it's now more in terms of justifying like our evidence, like trying to show them the value we're bringing, and not really starting from scratch and telling them this is a drone, it's safe, it's just flying over here for a couple of hours, and this is what we're trying to do. So our communities have progressed as well, which we're very proud of, because that's part of our essence in terms of being there and capacity building them as well, right? So right now it's not really hard for us to figure out the community engagement bit. But I can tell you maybe something that we are working towards is building this capacity more intentionally, because for instance, we recently flew near, it was okay, it's an informal settlement in Nairobi, in our capital city, right? And the kids were so excited to see this drone in the air, right? And you can actually tell they're eager to learn about it. And some are approaching us and they're like, "Oh, you guys, we didn't know Kenya Red Cross has drones. Like, oh, we're interested. Who can teach us?" So now it's more about figuring out how to extend this capacity to the communities and not really starting from scratch. So it's an exciting thing at the same time. Yeah, but for sure, community engagement has always been at the center of everything we do. We make sure that it's a very inclusive, participatory approach from the very get-go, and that we do our due diligence. And if there's anything that needs to be communicated back in terms of data we've collected, any analysis and findings, is that we do that then through our branches, right? Through the capacity we already have in the regions, to make sure that they remember that we came and mapped out this area and told them that this is a flood. It's a high risk area in terms of floods, and this is what needs to be done in terms of next steps. So I think the most important thing about community engagement is that you come full circle and you do your due diligence where any further data dissemination or analysis is concerned. Yeah, back to you, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Swabira. I think I'd like to ask everybody now about how they calculate the return on investment, how they show the impact of these new technologies. Maybe Swabira, will stay with you to start. You've mentioned kind of having obviously very tangible outputs in terms of maps and these pictures and things. Is there more that you do to kind of define success for the use of these technologies?
Definitely. I mean, we're all trying to make, we are managing our costs well, and I can give you that boring end of the conversation and tell you we're trying to manage costs, we're trying to be within our SOPs. But I think really with the dynamic landscape we have in terms of funding, in terms of partners, something we are learning, and this is mostly definitely as a result of having us, Ms. Safia as our executive director, is that she's always taught us about value add, right? And I think you've heard me mentioning it before in a conversation, is that despite finances and equipment, how do we make sure that we're really adding value in terms of the projects we're in? So in the beginning, it was because drones were new and satellite was new, and we're figuring out how to convince people to use this technology. And we're trying to get included in all the projects and just trying to justify to be given a seat at the table. The discussion now has changed, right? Because it's more about making sure that if we are part of that team, we're adding value, right? So what does that look like? So it's very contextual then if we're being practical about it. So then we figure out what does value look for in a specific project? Is it quick turnaround in terms of data processing? Is that where we're really adding value? Or if it's a typical response, if it's a response that we're involved in, how would the drone add value in this case? It's not just really maybe assessment. It's like, could we forge a path for the responders on the ground and then help them have an easier way to navigate, right? Or is it just a simple video that we are doing to amplify a project status? So I really think it's more about us figuring out what value looks like for us in that case. And it's not, the conversation has changed, to be honest, right? So it's more about defining value and making that the core of your operations, because then you can't really go wrong in that case, right? Yeah. Thanks.
But then I think you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Somebody has to do it at least once in every meeting, right? Oh, I think Wilson is actually having connection problems. I think he's dropped back off. So Benjamin, maybe you could talk a bit about how ICRC is measuring success and calculating impact when it comes to some of the technologies you're deploying.
Yeah, no, I think Swabira said it very well. I think it's all a matter of context, because if we were in a commercial organization, value would be kind of easier to measure, but it's not the case for us. I think we were really looking at either speed, things that we can do faster, things that we can do potentially with a better involvement of resources. Sometimes even the capacity is not there because we don't have enough hands to deliver on the things that are needed. So the value is when something that was not possible becomes possible. I think that's sometimes what we see with the new technologies, that if we think about, for example, even satellite communication, which we are using quite heavily, well, it creates safety for the staff. And this, of course, has an immense value. Or if we are able sometimes even to deliver one additional message about a missing person, or that has value. I think that's the type of value we're looking after. And it could be very simple, very complicated to calculate, but I think it has to be contextualized. So that's what makes it very interesting. I think being in this space as a technologist for a humanitarian organization is because you get to ask questions that sometimes nobody else is asking, and you get really to engage with people on the field to basically define what matters for them. And that's something which we have really which we have to learn to do better as a technologist, is to engage with people on the field in a way which is making them in the driver's seat in terms of defining what matters. And instead of pushing solutions that look cool, I think our job is really to cut through the noise and finding what really will create an impact.
Benjamin, when you're exploring new technologies, when you're engaging the users in the field about their needs, are you relying on in-house expertise to lead all these initiatives and do the work? Are you working with external partners? How do you balance that aspect of it?
I think that's a very difficult balance to find, right? Because we and things are evolving. I think that's probably we have to learn this how this environment is changing. Of course, operationally, we are relying on operating with a lot of different partners on the ground. So that's definitely part of the equation. Now, when it comes to technology, we used to have a lot of let's say external developers and external partners helping us out for either to develop new systems or to run the systems. And I think this is evolving a little bit. We've been internalizing some of this workforce over the past years, and we'd like to continue to do that as much as we can in order to ensure that the design of the applications is increasingly aligned with our values, I think, and with our principles. So of course, you could always train external consultants to align with these values, and you can put all the guidelines and architectural best practices to make sure that that's aligned. So this is definitely an option, but it's a bit easier if your internal team is actually the one driving this design, and it's a bit I'd say helpful in terms of independence and autonomy. So what we aiming at for not for everything, but for really the places that are the areas in technology that matter the most, we'd like to be as independent as it gets, and that's one of the reasons we are engaging into some of the open source capabilities for some of the technologies. Of course, if we're talking about let's say the ERP places, the logistics or financials or things which are very similar to the industry, we don't have to create internal capacity. But for areas where it seems to be important to be completely owning the design and being able to sustain it over the long run, we are trying to increase our footprint in terms of internal resources. And of course, it's always interesting as well to get more insights from external organizations, so tech organizations and academia, or obviously the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies are really important for us to make this learning collectively. So new technologies are evolving so fast that we need to bring on a regular basis some external eyes in order to learn faster.
Great, thank you. Swabira, other national societies that have explored drones have relied kind of on external partners to do the actual flying sometimes, and the national society focuses on just using the outputs of those missions. Can you share a bit about what the decision that Kenya made to have that be an internal capacity? And have you also maybe relied on external partners for some aspects of the work?
Sure. So for us, while drones were being introduced to us back in 2019, I believe, they were highly commercial, right? As we moved on with figuring out use cases, they're highly commercial. For us, we felt like drones are commercial, right? Even the regulations that followed eventually were highly commercial. So we constantly were trying to figure out where we fit in the drone ecosystem, right? So then Kenya Red Cross is known to lead in the innovation space within the movement, like with some things, for example, like the innovation space, right? So we sort of had to take lead and convene humanitarian partners and figure out, like, do we approach the regulator and figure out how to have a humanitarian approach to some of these regulations, or do we just carve out our own sector and ask for special licenses to operate, right? So it's been an interesting journey for us, to be honest. For us, because our operations are special in that way, then it only makes sense that we try and be self-sustaining, right? But I can tell you that in terms of figuring out how to balance like partnerships and organizations we're working with. One thing is for sure is that we make sure like we keep the mission critical capability in-house, right? So we as Kenya Red Cross, of course, through each we own the problem framing bit. The community engagement is on us, data governance, what our SOPs are, the operational decision-making bits, those are strongly in our core, right? So those are very central to our operations and we would never outsource that, right? But then where we feel there is a need to, then we would partner for more specialized operations or or if it's more like a learning for us, if we're trying to get in a specific sector, we'd partner to learn, right? So whether it's using maybe advanced sensors or figuring out how to do SAT analytics, stuff like that, AI modeling. So that's more of the kind of conversations we'll be having with partners to figure out how to either build that capacity in-house or even extend it to the communities, right? But I can tell you that we do use partnerships to build capacity and to learn, not really for dependency. And I also think that something we are learning is to figure out how to be a bit more agile with our funding, right? Figure out how we need to invest more in our people and our governance systems. Well, of course, making sure that we have flexible partnerships along the conversations we have, right? So for what is more out of our financial budgets, so to speak, what's not in our reach for now, then we can use partners to get us access to those kind of services and tools, right? So the whole idea is to make sure that it gives us the readiness without maybe locking out scarce funds into tech that can be quickly outdated, right? Like drones, every single day you wake up, there's a new DJI out there, right? There's a new mapping drone. So we have to strike a balance somehow and decide where our financial priorities lie then. But yeah, I think keep what's critical in-house and then figure out how to outsource more of the specialized stuff that we're not getting into yet or we don't have the capacity for. Yeah, back to you, Dan.
Swabira, staying with you for another question, I'd be curious, Benjamin has mentioned open source a number of times. Have you found that any of the open source drone software has been useful in your workflows?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think open source is where we all sort of start from to test, right? So we've used WebODM before, we've used Pix4D. We even tried to get the paid versions of them just to see how better to process our data and to analyze it. And I think something that we're all learning in terms of like from our data team especially is that as we find out about these tools and as we acquire them, it's very important to make sure that we have the staff who specialize in that, right? Because we need to always make sure that in terms of where data is concerned, that we're not going out of our means, so to speak. Because you'll find we have worked on a couple of mapping jobs before, right? And sometimes the bigger the area, the more data you're processing, the more quick the data turnaround needs to be. So we really rely internally in terms of the expertise we have to make sure that that's achieved, but still push the boundaries further with our partners, right? Can we get data credits? Can we get access to these platforms? I mean, we don't have anything to lose if we work with partners to test out their tools and mention it in our projects that we're testing out with these partners. So through such conversations and such partnerships, we've really been able to test different things, even those that we felt were maybe more expensive because you need like a 1-year subscription that's way out of budget for us. But it's really about looking inwards and figuring out how these different departments can amplify the partnerships we have. Yeah.
Wilson keeps joining and dropping. I think his connection must be unstable. So unfortunately, I'm not sure I can ask him a question. Benjamin, open source can be sometimes a bit of a hard conversation with an organization, kind of explaining what it is and the benefits. is that up to you to tell everyone at ICRC how great open source is and the benefits, or are there other people that are supporting you in that advocacy mission?
That's a good one. So actually, we are having a very pragmatic approach, right? We are if you're interested on the call, you could look into our tech strategy, which in fact defines in which areas we think that a commercial software might be more appropriate for the scope. So typically for ERPs, for a number of even digital workplace tools, we are leveraging pretty much proprietary software. But there are some areas where we believe that we need to invest a bit more to create this level of independence. So I would say being very honest about what it entails in terms of and I think Swabira said it, the commitment of resources on the medium term in terms of maintaining the sustainability, keeping that sustainable. So going very much with a progressive approach there, like creating capacity, creating confidence that we can manage it progressively. It's not the first time we are going in this kind of direction. For health, for example, we are leveraging the DHIS2 framework, which is an open source one. So it's not about going all one way or the other way. I think there is no such thing like a silver bullet here. It's really trying to identify what technology would fit the best to the specific principles and the specific needs, and looking at independence and resilience on one side, and looking at cost and efficiency on the other side, and speed. So it's really a matter of balancing that. So in a sense, we are pushing this. We have created this tech strategy that explains in which areas, which category of technology is seems to be the most appropriate, so that we can simplify over time the landscape. So it's probably more an architectural decision from an IT standpoint to decide, okay, which areas are more valid for this kind of approaches, and then it makes more sense overall. So we are, I would say, in technology, we are partnering with the different parts of the organization at ICRC who are in charge of defining the policy. So whether it's even our cyber delegation in Luxembourg, different partners we have in different departments, including data privacy, for example, where we define together what is the best approach depending on the scope. So it's a team effort, and it takes the organization to really learn about what works, what doesn't, and being very cautious in delivering these capabilities one after the other. Because indeed, it's not there is no such thing that a type of technology that will work every time better than the other. I think it's really making decisions based on principle.
Yeah, thank you for digging into that. We have just under 15 minutes left. If there's any topics from the audience that people are dying to hear, please use the chat function or the Q&A function to drop a question in, and we'll see if we can get to those. Swabira, we love talking about the successes and when things have worked well. Have there been any times you've had to backtrack on some of your experiments with drone technology, or change course, or something that didn't work just quite as well as you were hoping?
Yes, definitely. If I'm being completely honest, I think a big test for our operations and us as a team was during the drill that I spoke about in the beginning. We found ourselves working through a good part of the evening trying to figure out how to modify this drone so that it could work for our operation, right? Because surely, how do we deploy a drone from a moving ship, right? And still maintain our SOPs and still be safe and still hope that the drone won't fly, the wind won't gust it in the other direction, right? So to be honest with you, we almost we almost called it off. Like while we were trying to iterate around the drone, we had to modify it and have like a holder for it so that it could take off and land at ease, and we'd still have, and not even land really, we'd have a team member trying to get a hold of the drone as it's landing midship that's moving. So as we kept analyzing it and trying to figure out how to do this, to be honest, we really were like, this is crazy. Like even as we're going online trying to figure out how to do this, we realized that people who do it are not in a drill. They're doing it for fun, right? So whether or not they lose the drone, I mean, so that was definitely a good learning for us. Because then you have to consider the team dynamics. You have to make sure your team is safe. You have to be willing to lose your drone, So in that case, then you make a decision and be like, if anything is to happen, I'm responsible, but did we get the job done? So there's a lot of areas to play around with, but maybe just to backtrack a bit, and maybe for those who have projects running, and I'm sure maybe this is something we already do, but I find it's crucial, is having a risk matrix, right? Have a risk matrix that you keep revising and you keep going back to figure out if this is to happen, what's the next step? Is this a high risk? Is this a low risk? So that's really helped us, even in terms of making decision while the project is ongoing, and having a risk matrix as a reference point really saves you the harder conversations, because this is something you already identified as a high risk. So if there's something happening around it, you're either calling off the mission, or you're sending a smaller team, or you're sending the cheaper drone. So there's conversations that we have around those, but I would say have a risk matrix to help you with such decisions, so that you have a reference point and a point of accountability at the end of the day. But yeah, it's a learning curve for us, I think. Yeah. Back to you, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Swabira. There's a Q&A question about guidance for negotiating with leadership to explore a balanced and responsible, principled approach to emerging technologies. Swabira, you've said that in general, the senior leadership at Kenyan Red Cross has been quite supportive. Have there been any maybe tactics that you've used to keep them supportive? Anything that you would suggest other people? Any advice you would give to others to build that same strong relationship that you have?
I think it's hard to argue with someone who is bringing a conversation of value, right? I think I spoke about this earlier. If you can convince leadership that the tools you're using are bringing value in terms of how you're reporting, in terms of how you're conducting rapid assessments, in terms of how you're risk mapping, such conversations, like really find out what use cases work best for you guys as an organization, and then figure out how to customize those and really bring out the value, right? You'll find out that in the beginning of the conversation, the leadership is like, we don't have any money for you guys to go and test some toys, right? But as you progress the conversation and really bring value to the table where it counts, they're like, we have 10 million for you guys to go and play around with these toys and bring us some real actionable data, right? So it's really about how we package it, but I can't stress this more. It's more about, it's the value add, right? If you're bringing really good high resolution data, I promise you they're going to invest in you. If you're training a team and saying that we're going to have capacity in the regions and we don't always have to deploy from the headquarters, you might get buy-in from even the leaders who are in the regions, right? So it's more about packaging this well and showing value, and return on investment doesn't always have to mean that we're bringing in resources back, right? It's really about what else are we collecting or analyzing out there that can sit in place for financial resources that we're spending, right? It's a very dynamic funding landscape now. So we're all figuring out, of course, how to be sustainable, but also how do we really push the conversations around data and, of course, ethical data, making sure we're doing our part and that we are accountable to the communities where we are flying and where we're operating, but packaging would be it for me. Yeah.
Benjamin, I think as the Chief Information Officer, you're a bit higher in the organization. Do you have any tips for maintaining strong relationships? I imagine you have sometimes people coming to you asking to try something new. How do you keep building that trust and a strong culture of trying things?
I think it's again building on what Swabira said. I think the value is important, and I think what I've seen working better is when you don't propose something to the leadership as a technology project, but more come with the different stakeholders from the field, from the representatives of the different functions and métiers, and then together you provide some proposition of value, and the technology here is an enabler. It's nothing more. And I think that's really important to frame it that way. Now, how do you say no? That's another thing. I think what it's important to keep trying a few things and to keep learning, because the technology is evolving so fast that we need to be aware of the potentials. I think that's something which is critical. So what we have found as really again, not a perfect solution, but a way to avoid being stuck for too long is to implement short cycles of building, prototyping, and learning. So we have engaged into a product approach where basically we have a quarterly cycle of decision in terms of what are going to be the next things we're going to build as a team from a technology standpoint. And after 3 months, we look and assess if it's delivering some value or not. And if things are not delivering value, then we just reassess the prioritization of our resources. So having short cycles is a way to potentially commit a little bit of resources for a short time, and then if things works, then you can potentially bring some element of proof and reasons to believe that gonna be something to stick. Or on the contrary, if it doesn't work after 3 months, you might give it another chance for another cycle, but then if it doesn't work, then it's over.
Great, thank you. And some of those remarks, I think in part answered Omar's question in the chat about making sure you don't stay trapped in the pilot phase.
Yeah.
In a moment, we'll ask our two panelists to give some final remarks, maybe just any advice they would have for a fellow Red Cross Red Crescenter who is engaged in this innovation space. If they were mentoring somebody, what would they tell them? If there's any key points that they didn't get to through the questions but want to share with the group. Before that, we're going to go to one of the audience members, actually. Yurian, the head of digital transformation for ICRC, is on the call, and he's going to briefly tell us about the adoption of open source across the network, and if there's any core capabilities which are now powered by open source. Over to you, Yurian.
Thank you very much. I mean, obviously, I would wish that I would have the eyes completely on everything happening in the entire network, but unfortunately, I don't have that wisdom in me. At the ICRC Secretariat, I would say that in the absence of a strategy, we still probably work very similar as ICRC. So our core workplace capabilities, our finance and ERP capabilities are generally licensed products from the big global tech companies. So there we use that. In terms of products and services facing our national societies or being used more customized to our regular work, there we tend to use more open source. So the Go platform that we have obviously is a known product which is built in open source code. We also have multiple other products developed inside the network for use internationally by other national societies that are built in open source. So for digital engagement, elements are built around the ESPO CRM, volunteer management solution built on Civic CRM. We have a social media monitoring tool developed by Netherlands Red Cross, for example, and that you can find in GitHub. Something around warehouse management solutions, again, you can find in GitHub. Probably even solutions for satellite image analysis available in GitHub. So there's multiple other products that are available and made available and are open source in that sense. And there's many more that we can include and we can leverage inside the membership. And many national societies do similar ways in developing own tools that they make available in their assistance delivery. I hope that answers the question, Dan. But the main thing I think what is needed is we are more intentful where and how we decide what to use, and that we are better aware of the risks and manage those risks going forward. I think that's a core change, I would say, that we need to embark on as a collective. Back to you.
Thank you for those remarks, Jurgen. And then as we come to the end of our time, Benjamin, any words of wisdom for people doing innovation?
Well, I would say keep going innovation. I think that's really the important thing, because we don't have a choice, and I think innovation in our space is a necessity to do our job better and to really being able to have an even better impact thanks to technology. But I think we cannot do it alone. I think it's not a technologist question. It's really something that has to be transversal and learn from the needs of the communities. The do no harm approach remains the first thing we should keep in mind. And I would as well conclude by keeping an eye on the cybersecurity and finding the right balance between innovation and keeping our ecosystem safe. We see an increase of the cybersecurity threats across the board. So I think we need to be responsible as well with regards to implementing technology in a way that preserve the safety of the sensitive information. And there are ways to do that by sandboxing innovation in specific places and really learning fast. So I think it's a very exciting time to be in technology in our space now. But thank you for the opportunity to convey these messages.
Thank you so much. And then Swabira, any last remarks?
Yes, sure. I think for me, if there's a team out there that's trying to get into drones, or an individual by themselves, and they're not really sure how to go about it or where to start, I think I can't stress more in terms of testing different use cases, right? There's nothing that builds a team faster and better than testing out something new together, right? So figure out areas that your organization is interested in or is big in, and test out use cases around those areas, right? Because as you test, then you figure out what R&D looks like what research and development looks like. For us, we have innovation labs, so we're trying to figure out how to then make propellers, how to make drones for the kids that we train at the labs, and for them to start young. So don't be afraid to test out use cases. Figure out what R&D looks like for your organization and how that can help you be more efficient in terms of your resources. I think I mentioned this before, but maybe just to stress it a bit more, how to use our partners well, us being part of the partners, right? How to figure out what resources are out there and how best we can tap into those and work, and you really use partnerships to amplify the work we do and make our lives easier, increase our efficiency, what makes us faster, what makes us be more efficient where time is concerned. Yeah, I'm a big believer in terms of partnerships, and I always say to myself that whenever I partner, that partner should leave me better than I found them, or I need to leave them better than I found them, right? So transfer workflows. What does shared OCPs look like? How can we get mentorship in the conversation, right? Whether it's mentorship, whether it's a top-down approach or it's a bottom-up approach, are we learning from the kids in school, trying to figure out what gaps there are, what we could be missing out on? Are we extending mentorship the other way? But I think we're big on mentorship as the Kenya Red Cross and as ICRC specifically. So yeah, I think that's it on my end. Thank you so much, Dan, for the fantastic coordination, and for all our listeners. I'll leave my email in the chat box in case anybody wants to reach out and we can work together and figure some stuff out. But yeah, and thank you, Ronald.
Yes, thank you so much to everyone for joining, and thank you to those of you who stuck a few minutes over for the final conclusion of the session. We will have more of these webinar sessions as we go forward and get closer to the submission of the resolution. Benjamin, Swabira, fascinating discussion. Appreciate your contribution so much, and look forward to seeing you all in the future. As has been pointed out, the strength of the network is what makes this such a wonderful place to work, and makes all of our work much more powerful. So take care, and hope to talk again soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right, thanks.